Welcome to the Mindful Creative Show, where we explore mindfulness and creativity through inspirational chats and brief practices you can do at home for your own self-care. Today's show will be exploring mindfulness, body positivity, some guided breath meditation, as well as some simple mindful art activities that you can do to help embrace your inner critic. So let's dive right in. And I'm so excited today to be chatting with Tara Whitney. And I'd love, Tara, if you want to just say a few things about yourself or introduce yourself to everyone.
I'm a certified intuitive eating counselor. I'm a transformational coach. I'm also a yoga teacher and a Reiki master. And I help women reclaim the time and energy that they've lost to dieting and emotional eating. So I really focus my coaching practice on working with women to trust their bodies and to become a more intuitive eater. And I am an author of a book that I published in 2019. It's called Hungry, Trust Your Body and Free Your Mind Around Food.
I love how you worded where you said that you help women to learn how to trust their bodies, but also reclaim the time that they've lost. And I know that you do and thread in some work around mindfulness, and I'd just be curious if you could speak about that a little bit more as well.
The starting point, the mindfulness, the starting point is coming back into our bodies and recognizing that our bodies are sharing some brilliant pieces of information, brilliant pieces, just kind of saying, you know what, I'm taking all of this inside. I'm going to start noticing how my body feels. I'm going to start listening and being curious about the sensations my body is even sharing with me. To become aware of that takes some slowing down. And that's the fundamental component of mindfulness, isn't it? But it's necessary because we'll miss those subtle signs if we are distracting ourselves, if we're too busy hustling from here to there, moving from one thing to the next, and not even taking a moment to check in.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And I notice what's coming to mind for me is that a lot of my mindful art students, when they're new to a practice of combining mindfulness and art, there's two things that often come up. One is this trepidation or concern of, am I doing it right? Or feeling really uncomfortable and not wanting to really sit in whatever those sensations are or whatever arises. And I often will talk about how it's just an indicator of where we are in the present moment. So if we're noticing our breath changes, it just is giving us information about where we are in that moment. So that's something, just hearing you talk about it, that came to mind. And I know that can sometimes be a struggle. I'd be really curious to hear a little bit more about some of your viewpoints or what you find as main struggles with body image, what can be really supportive and nourishing for people as they start on this path.
The statistic that 90% of adult women are dissatisfied with their bodies is so heartbreaking, and for me, so relatable. And that specific study actually was done with thousands of women. I think it was over 5,000 women. And what's super interesting is it was between the ages of 25 and 65, which means, you take 10 women and only potentially one of those 10 is even happy with the body that they have. And so it's very pervasive. By the age of 8, 50% of girls are dissatisfied with their bodies, which is just like, okay, so obviously it's not us. It's the culture we live in that's telling us what an ideal body needs to be. Are we all striving? Do we all need to feel like our body needs to be a certain way in order for us to be loved and accepted and successful in this world? That's really the trick, is that it's not just what our body looks like. It's the messages that our body means that our life will be a certain way if we can achieve that body. And for some people, they look around, we get these messages and they're like, yeah, I'm never going to be that. But what can be really liberating for people is when they understand diet culture and they understand the billions of dollars that gets put into sending these messages to people so that companies can make money on our despair, on our shame, on our powerlessness, then what I experience is this sense of freedom, like a sense of, I don't need to buy into this. And it's not easy. Like it takes a lot of mindfulness, it takes a lot of awareness for me to recognize when those signals, when those messages creep in, and then they start to get back underneath my skin. And I have to stop myself and be like, yeah, no, I don't need to buy into that today. That doesn't need to be how I'm going to inform how I treat my body today. What's really applicable and what's really helpful for me right now, like I read Sonia Renee Taylor's The Body's Not an Apology, which is a really powerful book. And she had plenty of just amazing pieces in there. But she offered one statement that I'm using for myself, which is just reminding myself that my body is my ally. It's just a really simple statement. And anytime I sort of forget, or I notice some critical thinking coming in, or I'm judging myself, or whatever it is, I'm like, oh, yeah, my body is my ally. Like, oh, thank goodness I reminded myself of that. And that can just be enough to just turn it around. So to answer your question, it's like we got to be really aware that we're living in a culture that is not designed for us to love our bodies. If anything, it's designed for us to dislike and hate our bodies. And the only way to survive it is to really defy it and to not buy into it, and then be an active participant in how we want to relate to our own bodies.
I love that phrase that our body is our ally. I love that. It's such a good reminder and nugget to take away. It is, I think, what you're talking about is so pervasive and embedded in the culture. And so I'm not surprised to hear that from such a young age, that there is this taking on of that external criticisms. And I do a lot of work with the inner critic, and oftentimes the inner critic is there as a way to protect us and support us. And so hearing you talk about that reminder of our body as our ally is also that embracing of some of those external voices that have perhaps become internalized, or that inner judgment that can surface and arise. Hearing you talk about that, it reminded me of one other thing. Some of the women that I work with in my workshops, I'll do a letter. I usually call it a love letter, where we can write a letter to ourselves, and we'll have different themes or focuses. But one thing that has been really profound that's come up has been around body image things. And so even if, let's say a woman, as an example, feels great about their body overall, there might be one aspect of their body that they really don't enjoy. And how I've noticed how often we make that part of ourselves the other, that there can even be this speaking about that body part as an it, or like this kind of separation. So this practice of writing a letter from that body part or from yourself to yourself as how you can have deeper acceptance, or just a conversation, I think can be really interesting. I'm curious for you,
That's beautiful.
have any simple practices that might combine mindfulness or some of that body positivity or embracing of different parts of ourselves that you found really helpful?
Sure. I I love the breath. I love breath focus and being able to be engaged. Like you mentioned that this earlier in the conversation, taking the people in your workshops through a creative, process, and getting them to even recognize how their breath is changing. This ability to really soothe our nervous system when we're breathing and there's so many different ways in which we can breathe with intention and as more of a soothing process. But the reason why that's my favorite for something like body image is because all of that hatred and loathing and criticism, it's all up in our head. It's all up in this conversation, but our thoughts do impact how we feel in our body.
Mm-hmm.
And those critical thoughts can really put our body into a real fearful state where we may feel quite alarmed, we might feel quite triggered, and it might be really hard to get back into our body. And so it's like not making body love really the focus, but making embodiment the focus, knowing that our birthright is to be in our body. Our birthright is to be safe in our body. Our birthright is to trust our bodies. And so a practice as simple as a box breath, or a square breath, is a nice simple one to do anywhere. There's a lot of other yogic practices, especially in the Kundalini practice, where there's a lot of breath practices there. But those breath practices allow the body to be soothed enough so that we can come back into it. And we don't need to be fighting those critical conversations. We don't need to be engaging, trying to retaliate. A lot of times it's just a matter of putting our attention onto something much more loving and knowing that we can coexist. As you mentioned before, those critical thoughts are often there to protect us, to keep us safe. And just kind of saying, like, oh, here's that critical thought. At some point, I needed that thought. At some point, that was something that was necessary for me to feel safe. And the critical thought could be so habitual that it's just running in the background. But to be mindful and intentional and be able to say, well, how can I use my breath as a way to get back into my body and be fully engaged in my body, so that this doesn't need to be what's running the show. I can put myself back into the driver's seat, and the breath is a big one, a big part to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Love that you really focus on the simplicity, that it doesn't have to be this really long, elaborate, arduous process, that it really can be just that simple stepping back into the breath or awareness of the body. I'm
Mhm.
wondering, would you mind leading us through like the box breath or a
Oh yeah, let's do it. Yeah, perfect. I love it. So the box breath is simply breathing into a regular rhythm. And we'll start it really simply, because for people who are new to a breathing exercise, it will just make it a simple process. But so basically, let's just start by feeling your feet, and even recognizing that you're in a chair or you're seated, just kind of recognizing your body. And we'll just start with a one breath box breath, which will be simply going to breathe in for the count of one, hold your breath for the count of one, exhale for the count of one, and then hold your exhale as it is. So no breath at all for the count of one. And then we'll just do that again. So inhale, hold, exhale, hold. Inhale, hold, exhale, hold. Now this one I'm just going to increase to a 2 count. So inhale 1, 2, hold your breath for 1, 2, exhale 1, 2, hold empty 1, 2. And we'll do that one more time. Inhale 1, 2, hold 1, 2, exhale 1, 2, hold empty 1, 2. And you can just take an easy breath in and an easy breath out. And that's something where people could expand that to a 4 count, to a 5 count, to a 6 count. I don't know about you, Cynthia, but I often don't love holding the breath empty for a long period of time. I get a little antsy on that. So when I do my box breath, you could probably consider it an upside down triangle because I'll breathe in, I'll hold it, and then I breathe out. And then I skip the hold out, and then I breathe in. And so for people who are taking on this, it's totally fine to just make it your own. I've some people that I've taught in the past don't like the inhale being held. So don't do it. Just keep it for a beat and then just make it something that feels really soothing. That's the whole idea. It's not there to create angst or tension in the body. It's really there to feel soothing in the body.
Yeah, and I love that reminder to give permission to honor whatever feels good in your body and whatever feels really accessible that you can do that and also that reminder that it's different for everyone, that there are different tendencies and preferences, and maybe even different. Today you might feel one way and feel comfortable with one thing, and then a week from now it might shift. Yeah. And so just really honoring and giving that permission, which I think could be a nice stepping into of just attuning to what your body is wanting and needing as a practice. Yeah. So I love that reminder.
Which is exactly what we started talking about around food too. Mm-hmm. The whole idea that we got to trust and be aware of what our body needs, even when it comes to choosing to eat an apple, an orange, a bagel, a cookie. Like all of that starts from this awareness of like what's going to be soulful, what's going to be soothing, what's going to be enlivening for my body right now when I take the rules away and know that my body has the answers without diet rules or restrictions. Like, what does it really need? What is it really asking for? And whether it's in the breath or around all of these other ways that we get to care for ourselves.
Wanted to see if there's anything else that is really on your heart that you're feeling like you want to share or that feels important.
Sure. I took one of your creative doodling mala videos. I watched it and I so enjoyed it, Cynthia. Like I don't have it with me, but that's another beautiful overlap between what like I think ultimately this kind of place where our clients go to, which is this place to be expressed and this place to allow ourselves to explore, to trust themselves, to listen, and to really have a level of, in some ways, there's like both compassion and mindfulness. Like there's all these beautiful components, whether it's some of the work that you're sharing in your creativity or other forms of art or other forms of expression, whether it's writing, anything where we're being creative. It's just, it's an indicator of our aliveness. That's the way I look at that. I'm sure do you find that as well? That's kind of what you're seeing as the evolution of people's really claiming of themselves.
I find there's so many different avenues and pathways that can serve people. And I also see this thread around how can we have a safe space for ourselves to be in the present moment more, to be in our bodies more, to give ourselves permission to honor whatever is arising without judgment, to be able to express ourselves without judgment. And so much of, I used to have a restorative yoga teacher years ago, and she joked that restorative yoga was a doorway just leading you to meditation, that the entire practice was just leading and facilitating you to meditation. And I do feel that way often about mindful art activities, is that it's a more accessible pathway sometimes for people to then be able to meditate or be able to sit with some things that can be really uncomfortable and hard, because it allows us to engage, with making things without thinking too much about it. And so we can sort of get out of our own way. And then once we're dropped into creating and then kind of discovering, oh, what was that about for me, it just offers a pathway. And then the words can maybe come more easily, or there can be deeper insights. But there's sort of this, like, sifting through a forest first. And I find just that mindful art activities for me and for my students offers a really easy, accessible way to do that. But there's so many different pathways, which is what I love seeing in the world, that there's more and more, so people can feel really nourished and supported.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that. I love it. I mean, what a beautiful both tool and a form of expression.
Yeah. So I will share in the description box a link, so if anyone wants to find you and the work that you're doing in the world, they can definitely connect with you more. To hear about our upcoming mindful creative shows and mindful art activities, please be sure to subscribe and hit that bell notification, and I will see you in another video.